Chapter 13 of our text deals with reasoning. We've already looked at inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning. We get to the third type of reasoning, and that is reasoning by analogy. So sometimes we think from specific to the general, inductive reason. Sometimes we think from the general to the specific, deductive reasoning. And then sometimes we think by comparing two or more things. And that is what reasoning by analogy is. And so in the very first speech, the whom I really, I ask you to use a metaphor or an analogy to describe yourself. Various types of analogies. The first one is a literal analogy. And obviously this means we are comparing two things that are in the same class or category. For example, handgun control worked in Pittsburgh, therefore handgun control will work in Raleigh. So literal analogies involve comparing two things that are very similar. Historical analogies are a little bit different because they're comparing two time periods, two or more time periods, and they're used very often. Think about it. The Vietnam War. We always say that since we messed up in the Vietnam, we interfered, we got involved, we should not get involved and send our troops to fight a foreign war. That's one example. The other example would be prohibition failed and failed miserably. Therefore, government should not try to tell people what to do, especially when it comes to their consumption, whether it's drinking or drugs. Therefore, prohibiting drugs will not work. So, historical examples certainly work very well. The other one is, remember Hitler. He was not contained. We allow some type of dictator to continue. This is what he will do, and that may have been part of the reasoning that led to the removal of someone like Saddam Hussein. So historical analogies are used very often, but very often you have to look at them very closely because the time periods are different. Very often there are other factors that are involved. We can't dumb it down to one single factor very often. Figurative analogies are a distinct type of analogy. We're comparing things that are dissimilar, that are very different, or they are from different categories. Even though they're from different categories, they are similar in some way, and making the comparison would be effective in terms of persuasive impact. Okay, so we might say that the people of the United States are like a flower garden. In a garden, you can't give all the plants the same amount of water or light or fertilizer. Each plant has its own unique needs. So too with people, we can't and we shouldn't treat them all exactly the same. All right, or your body's like an automobile engine. If you don't give your car fresh oil and plenty of fuel, it will cease to operate. If you don't get some fresh air and protein, you will cease to operate. Or global terrorism is like a cancer. If you have cancer, you can't just eat well, take vitamins and get plenty of sleep. You need to do something decisive. You need to cut out the tumor if you can. Same thing with terrorism, cut out the cancer and things will go better. All right. These figurative analogies do illustrate their potential appeal, and they are used very often, but they often can be misleading. And there's a test. The key test is this. Are the things in the analogy that are being compared similar enough in important ways? If you can't show similarities between the cities or the historical periods or whatever you're comparing, then your analogical reasoning certainly is in trouble. The one that people use very often is this one, and you've heard it, I've heard it. If we can build a nuclear weapon in just a few years, the Manhattan Project, or we can put a man on the moon within the span of 10 years, then we should be able to stop global warming with a similar dedicated effort. Well, it's not exactly the same. Global warming is much more difficult and it is a greater challenge than the others. All right. The fourth type of reasoning is sign reasoning. That is joining the dots, essentially. It's looking at visible signs and drawing some type of cause and effect connection. So I ate a barrel of pork rinds and I gained a few pounds. I'm starting to think that pork rinds are fattening. Little kids are using laptops all the time, and their scores on math achievement tests are down. Given their obsessions with computers, it's any wonder that they're struggling. So using laptops causes you to do badly on math achievement tests. Of course, these links are all dubious. A key point is that sign reasoning cannot and does not explain why there is a relationship or connection. It shows some type of relationship. It may be causal, it may be causal, and it tells you investigate further. That's the best it can do. And then lastly, it is causal reasoning. Causal reasoning is like sign reasoning in the sense that it alleges a connection between two or more things. But the difference is that causal reasoning can identify the causal link and it can explain the why, unlike sign reasoning, which doesn't do that. So why is the sky red? Why is the red sky at night a sailor's delight? So the test for sign and causal reasoning is this. Is the relationship being expressed one of correlation? Are they correlated in some way? Or is there causation? All right. So correlation, it happens at the same time. Causation, one causes the other. And the example the text gives, when the NFL season begins, the weather is warm pretty much everywhere. But as the season progresses, especially as we get into November, December, the weather gets progressively colder in many places. This is proof, most definitely, that American football causes winter. Of course, we have a correlation, a causal relationship between the two, and not a causation one. All right, and that is essentially the essence of the chapter. Read through the last bit that deals with looking at Sports Illustrated. Yes, thanks.